Good afternoon to all the students. So yesterday we have completed one of the topic related to the C programming language, that is recursion. I think you are clear about those concepts, right?
Yes, sir.
So in today's class we will discuss one more important concept related to the C programming language or any programming language, right? That is called as algorithm. We are going to study the algorithm concept, and once we are done with this algorithm we will discuss the asymptotic notations, right? The flow for today's session will be like this. We will discuss what an algorithm is and what are the important characteristics of the algorithm, and also we will discuss what are the performance metrics of an algorithm. After discussing the performance metrics of an algorithm, we will jump to the topic of asymptotic notations, where we will be discussing three types of notations, that is big O notation, big omega and big theta notations, and we will have some discussion on those asymptotic notation, and then we will close the session, right? So can anybody tell me the meaning of the algorithm? What do you understand by the algorithm?
Step-by-step process, sir.
Right, it is a step by step process to give a solution to a problem, right? So a step by step process that we follow to give a solution to a problem is called as algorithm. So in computer science this is a very famous term. So we have lot of problems and we need to give, as a programmer or a software engineer, you should give the solutions to the problems, right? So one customer will come to you and he will give some problem, and you need to address or you need to give a solution to his problem. In order to give a solution to his problem, you can make use of any programming language that suits you, right? So for that particular application or for that particular problem, you might have different options where you can choose the C programming language, and somebody may choose C++, somebody may give the solution using Java and Python, all these things, right? So we have a lot of choices for getting the solution for a problem programmatically. But before giving a solution using the programming language or before writing a program, one should know a particular concept called as algorithm. So whenever you have a problem, don't just try to write the code or don't just try to write the program using some programming language. Before that, what you have to do is, whenever you get a problem and you are asked to give a solution, first of all you have to write an algorithm, and then you have to convert that algorithm into a diagrammatical representation which is called as a flow chart, and based upon the flow chart you can write a software program. So you can assume that writing a program for a given problem or writing giving a solution for a problem is a third step. The first step is, initially the programmer has to give the solution in a step by step process, which we are calling it as algorithm. So the first step the programmer has to do is, he has to write an algorithm, and then he has to convert the algorithm into the pictorial representation in order to understand the concepts thoroughly. So the pictorial representation gives you a thorough overview of the solution. Once you convert the algorithm into pictorial representation, that is flowchart, you have to start writing the program using any programming language of your choice. This is the flow normally the software developers will follow in the software industries, right? But we won't generally bother about these algorithms, right? So why? Because it is a generalized thing, right? Algorithm does not mean or is not related to any programming language, right? There is no algorithm for the C, there is no algorithm for the C++, there is no algorithm for Java. Algorithm is a common term which is used as a primary step to develop the software or to give a solution to a problem, right? Never combine the term algorithm with a programming language. Nobody asks you to write an algorithm in C programming language for a particular problem. He will just ask you to write an algorithm for a problem, right? But whenever you are asked to write a program, you will be asked to write a program using a particular language, that is C or C++, Java or Python. So that is the difference you should understand. Algorithm is not related to any programming language. Algorithm is a generic term. It is a step-by-step process of a solution that you give to a particular problem, right? So knowing about these particular basics of the algorithm, we will just jump into our discussion. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Right. So the word algorithm comes from the name of a Persian mathematician, Abu Jafar Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. Right. We are not bothered about who invented this algorithm term or who coined this term, right? But you should know that it is a Persian mathematician. As I told that most of the computer science concepts have been developed by the mathematicians only, right? So that is the strong relationship between the computer science and the mathematicians. Most of the concepts, for example, you go and search the history of the programming language or the computer science. Most of the algorithms or whatever we deal in the computer science were developed mostly by the mathematicians only, right? So the algorithm was developed, or the algorithm name was given by the Persian mathematician. In computer science, this word refers to a special method that is it is a process, right? It is a special method that is usable by a computer for giving a solution of a problem, right? Whenever you want to give a solution to a particular problem, you write it in a sequence of steps. Those sequence of steps will combinedly call it as the algorithm for that particular problem. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So an algorithm, this is the actual definition of an algorithm. An algorithm for solving a problem is a finite sequence of unambiguous executable steps or instructions which if followed will ultimately terminate and give solution to the problem, right? So this is the actual definition you should give. Whatever definitions we are giving, that algorithm is a step-by-step process, all these things are just for the understanding purpose. But when you want to exactly quote the definition of the algorithm, you should write it in this manner. It consists of a finite sequence of, what do you mean by finite?
Countable, sir.
Countable, sir.
Countable. That means when you write an algorithm, you cannot keep on writing the steps, right? So there should be a limit. So there should be when you give a solution to a problem, there should be a limit on the number of steps you give the solution. You cannot keep on writing, and it cannot be, the instructions cannot be infinite in nature. So you should have a finite number of instructions, and those instructions are also called as steps. That is the reason why we are calling it as a step-by-step process, right? So those instructions should be finite in nature, and remember that those instructions should be unambiguous and executable. What do you mean by unambiguous?
Without any confusion, sir.
Please speak loudly. What do you mean by unambiguous?
Clearness, sir.
Yeah, clarity. Super, right? So ambiguity means there exists a confusion. That means you cannot take a right decision. You cannot say that this is going to happen or this is going to happen, right? Ambiguity, that means there is a confusion of where to end up the things, right? But unambiguous means you have the instructions that are given for a particular problem should be unambiguous. That means the statements should not be confusing, right? If I write a particular statement, it should give a particular meaning. It should end up in giving some sense to the programmer or some sense to the person who is reading this algorithm, right? And similarly, they should be executable. You should not write some dump statements which are not executable. So this is how we define these instructions in a algorithm. The instructions should be unambiguous and they should be executable and they should be finite in nature, right? So if I write any finite set of instructions which are unambiguous and executable, and if I follow this sequence of instructions, I will ultimately terminate. So termination is also one of the important thing, right? I told that the algorithm should have the finite number of instructions, that means illimited number of instructions, and the algorithm should terminate. That means you cannot write a program such a way that it always executes, right? It should terminate at some particular point. For example, if you take the looping constructs, when you doesn't give the condition for the looping constructs perfectly, then you will ultimately end up in a infinite loop situation where you will be continuously executing a set of instructions. So that should not happen. The same thing, that means whenever you write an algorithm, you should keep it in mind that the algorithm should terminate at any point of time, right? So that is another important characteristic. The instruction should be finite in nature, the instruction should be unambiguous, and the instruction should be executable in nature, and ultimately the algorithm should terminate and give the solution to the problem. So these blue colored words, the finite, unambiguous, executable and terminate, all these four terms represent the characteristics of the algorithm. Is it clear up to this definition?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So we have discussed all these steps, finite set of steps. Okay, I know. Unambiguous, right? Every instruction should give a perfect meaning and they should give some sense to the user, right? And they should be executable in nature, and ultimately the algorithm should terminate. You cannot write algorithms which cannot terminate, right? Which keeps on executing is somewhat we don't expect from the algorithm. The algorithm should terminate. That is the four different characteristics we have, right? Can we one simple question I want to ask: can we have algorithms that does not accept output inputs? Right. Let us discuss these inputs and outputs. Can algorithm have inputs and outputs?
Yes, sir.
Yes, right. So can we write an algorithm without any inputs? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, right. Can we write an algorithm without outputs?
No, sir.
No, right, super. So this is the point you have to remember. When you write an algorithm, that means you are giving a solution to a problem. You can write the algorithm such that the algorithm may or may not accept the inputs, but you cannot write an algorithm without outputs. So when you say something about the algorithm, it should have definitely one output, right? One or more outputs. At least one output should be there, but there is not, that is not mandatory with respect to the inputs. You may have the inputs for the algorithm or you may not have the inputs for the algorithm, right? So you can write an algorithm without inputs also, but you cannot write an algorithm without outputs. So these 2 points are very important. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Right. So why do we need this algorithm? As we know that we need to communicate with the computer. Whenever we need to communicate with the computer, we cannot express or we cannot make use of the natural languages such as English, Telugu, Hindi. All these languages are not understandable by the computer. In order to make the computer understand, we should make use of some programming languages. We have seen 3 different programming languages like machine language or low level languages. We can also call it as low level languages. Similarly, we can have the programming languages such as Java, Pascal and C, which we call them as the high level languages. So in between this low level and high level languages, we have another category which are called as assembly languages. So these are the three different programming languages, categories of programming languages. We have low level, assembly and high level. Right. So we have these programming languages, and these programming languages help the user to communicate with the computer. Right. Other than this, we have some other things called as pseudocode, and prior to this programming language, we have a concept called as algorithm. Right. It is the way you represent the algorithm. You need to have some way to represent the algorithm. You should represent it. Right. So this is the proper sequence of steps that the programmer has to follow in order to give a solution programmatically. Don't write the program as and when you get this problem. Right. You should write the algorithm, and remember here what he is saying. Cannot use the English language. When you use the pure English language, that is termed as the pseudocode. Pseudocode is nothing but it is something similar to that of the algorithm, but you express everything in the pseudocode using the English language, and it is not mandatory that the algorithm should make use of the English language. It is just a step by step process to give a solution to a problem. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Right. So we have a problem. Assume that we have a problem, and I give that problem to your entire class, which consists of some 30 members. Right. So assume that all the 30 members has come up with different algorithms. So by this example, now tell me how many solutions can a problem have? How many solutions can a problem have? Is it one problem?
So many
one
solutions, sir.
Yeah, a problem, one particular problem can have many solutions, right? So one problem, many solutions. It is not the case that one problem, only one solution, right? So if I give a task, or if I give a problem to your entire class consisting of 30 members, all the 30 members may come up with different solutions, right? Or different algorithms. Solution is nothing but here in this context we are referring to the algorithm. So at this particular juncture, algorithm is our solution to the problem. So 30 persons, they come up with different solutions. That means they come up with 30 algorithms. Now I have to find my task. Now it is my turn, and I want to find out of these 30 algorithms, which algorithm is going to give me the best results, or which algorithm is going to perform efficiently. This is what I have to evaluate. So this is called as evaluation of the algorithms. So one particular problem, we have n solutions, and out of these n solutions I have to pick one particular algorithm which is performing efficiently. So for this purpose we should consider two metrics. For what purpose? In order to assume, or in order to evaluate the performance of the algorithms, or in order to measure the performance of the algorithms, or else we can also say that in order to measure the efficiency of the algorithms, we should we have two different metrics to measure the efficiency. Those metrics are called as the time complexity, and the other one is the space complexity. Satish, please mute your mic. So what for these metrics are used? If somebody asks you what are the two metrics for measuring the efficiency of the algorithm, you can blindly say that the two metrics are the time complexity and the space complexity. What for this time complexity and space complexity is used? Anybody please respond.
For determining the efficiency, sir.
Efficiency of what?
Algorithms, sir.
So for determining the efficiency of the algorithm, we are going to use these two metrics, the time complexity and space complexity. Now let us discuss what this time complexity is and what this space complexity is. Right. So this is the definition of the time complexity. Time complexity is a function. Listen, this is a mathematical notation. So since the algorithm was developed by a mathematician, everything he wants to explain it in terms of mathematics only, right? So time complexity is a function that describes the amount of time an algorithm takes to execute. So the total time taken by the algorithm to execute, we can call it as the time complexity. But few terms or few concepts or few important points you have to remember in this time complexity is, never ever assume that the time complexity is the clock time, right? It is not the clock time. For example, assume that there are two algorithms, A1 and A2, algorithm 1 and algorithm 2. If I want to measure the efficiency of this A1 and A2, I represent it with the time complexities, right? So time complexity is explained, or it is measured as a function, right? For example, I say it as big O of n, and I say the algorithm A2 is having the time complexity of n square, where n is the number of elements. Let us assume like that. So this does not mean that the A1 algorithm is going to take n seconds or n time units, not only seconds, it can be milliseconds or microseconds also. Don't assume that. And similarly A2, the algorithm A2 is taking n square time units. This is not the actual thing you should understand, right? This is not the actual thing you have to remember, right? Please remember that the time complexity is not the wall clock time. This is just a term that is given, that's it, right? So the time complexity is a function to describe the amount of time an algorithm takes, and we should describe what this time actually is. One point is clear, right? You should not measure the time complexity in terms of wall clock or in terms of time units. Don't measure it in seconds, don't measure it in milliseconds, etc. But how we have to measure this time complexity means, it means the number of memory accesses that are performed, right? So how many memory accesses that you have performed, that is considered for the time complexity. Similarly, how many operations you have done. For example, how many comparisons. Let us assume that the operation that I am going to perform is the comparison. So how many comparison operations that I have performed between the integers, that can be considered as the time complexity. And similarly, how many number of times the inner loop is executed. What do you mean by inner loop and outer loop? Anybody please tell me, what do you mean by inner loop and outer loop?
Inner loop is the loop that is inside another loop, sir.
Super, right? So when you consider the nested looping constructs, so nested looping constructs means one loop inside another loop. So the outer loop we have, and within that outer loop we have another loop which is called as inner loop, right? So how many number of times the inner loop is going to execute, this should be considered as the time complexity. And some other metrics also you can consider, but these are the most important metrics you should consider it for the time complexity of an algorithm. Never ever assume that the time complexity is measured as the number of time units. So how many memory accesses you are performing, how many inner loop, how many times you are executing the inner loop, how many comparison operations you are performing, all these things should be considered for the time complexity, right? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
So this is what the author is going to trying to tell us. We try to keep this idea in the time separate from wall clock. So never assume the wall clock as the time complexity, right? Why we are not considering the wall clock means there are many other factors which are not belonging to the algorithm and they can affect the real time. For example, the programming language you use, it may affect the efficiency of the algorithm. That means it may affect the time complexity of the algorithm. Similarly, the proficiency of the programmer, if you are working with a good programmer, he can write or he can choose efficient data structures and he can write efficient algorithms. So the knowledge levels of the programmer also has an external impact on the time complexity. Similarly, the optimization in the compiler, you take the old compilers and you try to run a efficient program, you will get the less time complexity. But if you take the same algorithm and you try to run on an optimized compiler, then you will have the less time complexity, right? Now tell me, how can you say that it is an efficient algorithm if it is having the less time complexity or more time complexity?
Less time complexity, sir.
Right, super. So whenever you have an algorithms, whenever you want to compare the algorithms, then the algorithm which is having the less time complexity is considered to be an efficient algorithm than the counterpart, right? So the time complexity should always be minimized. It should be minimized. When you minimize the time complexity, then we can say that we get an efficient algorithm. Is it right or not? Right. So the
Yes, sir.
time complexity also depends on the hardware. For example, you run an algorithm on a old system, Pentium 3 processor, it will take a lot of time. And you run the same program with some quad core processor, the algorithm will run within no time, right? So these are some external factors on which the complexity of the algorithm depends, or on which the time complexity depends. So based upon these factors which are not related to the algorithm, right, we should not consider the wall clock time. Algorithm means it is a step by step process. So whatever, we should not consider these things, but it does not happen, right? So when you are working with some system, or when you are working with an world compiler or world hardware, then all these will combinedly affect the efficiency of the algorithm, right? But what the author is trying to say is these external factors may not be considered, right? You should only consider, whenever you want to find the time complexity of the algorithm, you should only consider the exact metrics or exact factors that influence the time complexity, like the number of memory access, like the number of times the inner loops is executed, like the number of comparisons you are going to perform. So these are the original factors on which the efficiency of the algorithm should depend. It should not depend on these external factors. That is what the author is trying to say. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So the other metric on which the efficiency of the algorithm depends is the space complexity. So here also you can observe that space is nothing but the memory, right? So it is also expressed in terms of function only, but it describes the amount of memory an algorithm takes in terms of amount of input to the algorithm. So what amount of memory that the algorithm takes, that is considered to be the space complexity. Right. Again, here also you should remember that this space complexity means memory requirements. I am saying in a simple term that it is a memory requirement, but you should remember that it is considered to be the extra memory that is needed. It should be considered as the extra memory that is not needed, not counting the memory needed to store the input itself. This is very important, right? You never consider the input the memory that is occupied by the input. For example, if you are performing a bubble sort on 10 numbers, so what is the size of the array you should declare?
Ten, sir.
10, right? But you should not consider this for the space complexity. Why? Because counting the memory needed to store the input is not the actual space complexity. For example, for performing the bubble sort algorithm, we require some 5 extra spaces. Assume, this is just an assumption, right? We require for some 5 extra memory locations. So these extra memory locations are considered to be the space complexity. They should be considered as the space complexity, but not the actual array. 10 elements should not be considered as the space complexity. The only space complexity is what extra memory you are taking to perform the algorithm or to write the algorithm. That is the only thing you should consider for the space complexity. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So here you have to express it in terms of bytes, but it is very easier. How many number of integers you are using, how many number of structures you are using. So you express everything. The space requirements can be expressed as the number of integers or the number of structures. So these type of things you should remember. So time complexity means you should remember that how many memory accesses are required, how many inner loops, how many times the inner loop is going to be executed, how many comparison operations you are going to perform. That is to be considered for the time complexity. Similarly, for the space complexity, you never consider the memory that is required for the input. You should only consider the extra memory that is required to operate or to write the algorithm. What extra memory is required, that only should be considered as the space complexity, right? And remember that this is also important, space complexity is sometimes ignored, right? We won't bother about this space complexity. We always express the performance of the algorithms in terms of time complexity. This is what we are learned, right? Right. Sometimes that is the reason why the author is saying that the space complexity is sometimes ignored, because space is used minimal or it is obvious, right? We always take the algorithms or write the algorithms which stores only the inputs. Maybe they doesn't require any extra spaces to perform the task, right? So when you are not bothered about, or when you are not taking any extra memory, then that should not be considered as the space complexity. That is what we have listened, right? That is what we have learned. That is the reason why the space complexity is sometimes ignored. But in some algorithms or in some cases, it becomes an important issue as a time complexity, right? So it depends on the problem which you are dealing with, right? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So we have 3 different cases. This is for the time complexity we will be explaining. So for some algorithms, the efficiency depends on the form of input, right? So we have 3 different cases here: the worst case, the best case, and the average case, right? Out of these 3 cases, can anybody tell me which one need to be considered the most prioritized thing?
Worst case, sir.
Worst case, right? So never assume the time complexity or never estimate the performance of the algorithm based on the best case and average case. So you have to always take the worst case into consideration for measuring the efficiency of the algorithm. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. So this is all about the algorithm. Till now we have discussed what an algorithm is, and similarly we have discussed what are the characteristics of an algorithm, we have discussed the metrics that are needed to measure the performance of the algorithm, like the time complexity and space complexity, and we have gone some deep discussions on what actually the time complexity is and what actually is the space complexity is. And is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Right. So we will move to the other concept, which is called as asymptotic notations. Can you see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Right. So what are these asymptotic notations? These are nothing but notation. That means we give some symbols. We have three different types of notations which are famous in this algorithmic concepts. One is big O notation, another one is big omega notation, and another one is big theta notation. So we will see all these notations in this particular concept. So let us discuss what this asymptotic means. What do you mean by asymptotic? So it is something related to the mathematical term again. As I told that the computer science has a strong relationship with the mathematics, and the asymptotic is also a term that was taken from the mathematics, right? It is a mathematical model, right? Asymptotic means whenever you approach a value closer, then that type of things are called as asymptotic notations, right? So for example, in the mathematics we have some limits. Have you worked on these limits in the intermediate classes? Limit x tends to 0, x square is equal to, what is that one? Have you gone through these limits concept?
Yes, sir.
So when you apply these limits, what happens is you are approaching to a particular value. So whenever you have such type of concepts where you are closely moving towards a value, those type of things are called as asymptotics. Asymptotic, right? So here we are going to make the efficiency of the algorithm very much closer to a particular value. Either you can, so that is the reason why we have these notations, three notations: big O notation, big omega notation, and big theta notation. Other than this, we also have this small o and small omega also. That's a different case. We are not going to study anything about these small o and small omega. These are completely out of our syllabus, right? So asymptotic, have you got any idea on this asymptotic? Yes or no?
No, sir.
Right. So asymptotic is a mathematical term which says that you are approaching nearer to a value, right? So we express the complexity of the algorithm in terms of mathematical expressions, and we want to simplify that mathematical expressions. For example, you express the thing like n square plus 3n plus 10. We will express the complexity like this, right? But complexities cannot be expressed as a multiple terms like this. N square is one term, 3n is another term, 10 is a constant. You cannot express the complexity of the algorithm in these multiple terms. So I want to make these multiple terms to reach to a particular value, and that should be almost equal to this value. For example, if n square is equal to 1, what is the value we have? It is 14, something like that, right? So you apply some mathematical operations on this n square plus 3n plus 10 such that you make it to move towards a particular value. So those type of attempts that you perform in the mathematics are called as asymptotics. So here also in the measuring the efficiency of the algorithm, you are converting the expressions, mathematical expressions, into a single term. That is the main use of this asymptotic. Instead of expressing it in multiple terms, you convert these multiple terms into a single term. That is the reason why we make use of these asymptotic notations, right? So there are three types of notations based upon the three cases what we have in the algorithms. What are those three cases?
Best case, worst case, average case.
Yes, worst, best and average cases, right? So for these three cases we have a corresponding notation. So when I want to represent a worst case time complexity, I represent it with big O notation. When I want to represent a best case time complexity, I represent it with omega notation, big omega. We should call it as big omega. And when I want to represent the average case, I represent with big theta. So this represents the worst case, big omega, big O, and big omega represents the best case, and the big theta represents the average case. Okay. So these three notations correspond to three different cases that we deal with the algorithms: best, worst and average. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Right. This point we know. So coming to the introduction part of the asymptotic notation, the efficiency of the algorithm depends upon the amount of time, which is nothing but the time complexity, and it also depends on the storage, which is nothing but the space complexity, and some other resources. Can anybody tell me what are these other resources? Mainly we have this time complexity and space complexity, but what are the external factors? We have discussed it recently. What are these external factors? Please respond. Just now we have discussed these things. So the external factors are the hardware on which you are running the algorithm, the compiler that you are using to run the algorithm. Like that we have seen some factors, right? So all these factors constitute the external resources or external factors that influence the algorithm. But majorly we should consider only the time complexity and space complexity. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So an algorithm have different performance for different types of inputs. That is what we have known, right? For example, assume that bubble sort. Again take the case of bubble sort. If I give the input size as 10, that means I want to this bubble sort to sort 10 elements. Assume that it takes 10 milliseconds or 10 units of time. For the same bubble sort algorithm, if I give the input as 100 elements, will it be sorted in just 10 units of time or it will take more time?
More time, sir.
It will take more time, right? It will take more than 10 units of time. This is clear, right? So when we change the inputs, whether it can be the number of inputs or, for example, for the bubble sort itself, let us take it as the bubble sort only. I give the input which is already sorted, right? So does the bubble sort need to do anything? Already I have given the input as the sorted elements, so the output is also a sorted array of list. So what is that bubble sort is doing? It is just taking and just comparing and just giving the output, right? Is it right or not?
Yes, sir.
So if the bubble sort is accepting the already sorted list of elements, can it be considered as the best case or worst case?
Best case, sir.
It is considered as the best case. Super. So what might be the worst case?
If the elements are
Elements are
mostly
in
unsorted.
If the elements are in the unsorted, but if the elements are in the reverse order, for example, you want to sort the list of elements using bubble sort in the increasing order, but you have given the list of elements in the reverse order, that means in the decreasing order. So that is considered to be the worst case, right? So the input that you have given to the bubble sort, if it is already sorted, it is considered to be the best case, and if the input is in the reverse order, then it is considered to be the worst case. And if the input that you are giving to the bubble sort is jumbled, or it is in the random fashion, it is neither in the reverse order nor in the sorted order, so that is considered to be the average case. So based upon the inputs you are giving to the algorithm, sorted, reverse or unsorted, the performance of the bubble sort depends on the inputs also. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So in such case, you have to consider these asymptotic notations. So whenever you are having different types of inputs, whether they may be in the form of sorted, unsorted or reverse order, or whether they may be in the form of the number of elements, 10 elements it will take some amount of time, 100 elements it will take some amount of time which is greater than 10, 1000 elements it may take more number of time when compared to that of sorting 100 elements, right? So in such cases you have to consider, or you have to measure the efficiency of the algorithm using these asymptotic notations. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
So as I told that the word asymptotic means approaching a value. So you are going to approach to a particular value. This is purely to make or to remove the insignificant factors. This is what we are doing. Why we are going to use this asymptotic model to measure the efficiency of the algorithm is, this particular asymptotic behavior or model is having some 3 important characteristics. That is, you are going to ignore the constant factors. For example, you take this simple thing. What are the constant factors we have? So for example, if you take this particular expression 20n square plus 3n minus 4, this asymptotic notation or the asymptotic behavior on this 20n square plus 3n minus 4 says that you can simply ignore the constant factors and you can simply ignore the insignificant parts of an expression. So by looking at this particular expression will be evolved to a single term which is big of n square. That's it. Similarly, this particular expression n cube plus 100n minus 2, it will be evolved to big of n cube. So what I am doing, when I have a higher order term, the lower order terms can be neglected, and similarly when I have a combination of constant or a coefficient, you can neglect the coefficients also. So ultimately this will lead to big of n square. So coming to this example, n cube plus 100n minus 2, when compared to that of value of n cube, 100n minus 2 is nothing. Is it right or not? Is it right or not? For example, you take the value of n is equal to 100. What happens to n cube? What is the value of n cube?
10,000, sir.
It is 10 power 6, it's not 10,000.
Yes, sir.
Right. What is 100n? 100 into 100, it is 10 power 4. Right. And minus 2. So when compared to that of 10 power 6, the 10 power 4 and minus 2 are less significant, so you can neglect this part. And n cube does not have any constant or coefficient here, so you can neglect it also. So for this purpose, you have this n cube plus 100 and minus 2 can be simply written as n cube. So for making the long expressions which consists of multiple terms to be converted into a single term, we are going to make use of this asymptotic notations from the mathematics. Now is it clear why we have gone through this approach, asymptotic notations?
Yes, sir.
Right. So the second point is what we have discussed, to devise a better way of representing the complexities of the algorithms in a single term or in a single coefficient. In order to express the efficiency of the complexity of the algorithms, we in a single coefficient we are making use of this asymptotic notations. Similarly, so that the comparison between algorithms can be done easily. For example, assume that this is the complexity of this algorithm A1 and this is the complexity of algorithm A2. Which one is more efficient? Is it A1 or A2?
A1, sir.
A1. Why? Because it is having the less complexity, that is big O of n square, when compared to that of another algorithm A2 which is having the complexity of big O of n cube. So this is considered to be the best algorithm or good algorithm, right? But if you express this algorithm A1 efficiency as 20n square plus 3n minus 4 and A2 efficiency as n cube plus 100n minus 2, so you have to make all the calculations and then you have to measure the efficiencies. In order to avoid the processing thing, what they have done is they have used these asymptotic notations. Thereby you can neglect the constant factors and insignificant factors, and you can convert the expression into a single coefficient. Thereby you can efficiently compare the algorithms. Is it clear? Now you might have got a clear idea on why these asymptotic notations are used, right?
Yes, sir.
Right. So simple thing, we just go through this slide. Asymptotic notations are used to represent the complexity of the algorithms. This point we are very much familiar, and these are the notations, which are called as mathematical tools to represent the complexities. As I told that the asymptotic behavior is a term that is taken from the mathematics only, right? So these are notations or mathematical tools that are used to represent the complexities. So the study of change in performance of the algorithm with the change in order of input size is defined as asymptotic analysis. So here is the actual definition of asymptotic analysis. So the study of change in performance, how the algorithm is going to change or how the performance of the algorithm is going to change with the change in the order of input size. So all these asymptotic analysis are based on the inputs that you give to the algorithm, right? So how the performance of the algorithm is going to change when you change the input, that is termed or that is analyzed based upon this asymptotic analysis. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Similarly, asymptotic notations are mathematical notations used to describe the running time of an algorithm. This also we know, and this example also we have taken. If you want to make the performance of the bubble sort, if you want to analyze the performance of the bubble sort in different inputs, if the input is in reverse order, we call it as the worst case. If the input is already sorted, we call it as the best case. If the input is neither sorted nor in the reverse order, we call it as the average case. So we have three different cases based upon the inputs, the type of inputs you give to the algorithm. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So please bear with me for 10 more minutes so that I can complete this topic. What is your next class at 2 o'clock?
MSF, sir.
What is that one?
Mathematical and Statistical Foundations, sir.
Srinivas sir, right?
No sir, Rajshekhar sir.
Okay. Please just bear with me for 10 minutes so that I can close this topic. Right. So there are three asymptotic notations for measuring the complexity of the algorithm based upon the inputs. One is the big O notation, another one is the big omega notation, and this we call it as big theta notation. Big O rotation represents the upper bound. This is very important. You have to remember only few terms, right? Don't remember all these things and get stressed upon these terms, right? So big O notation represents the upper bound of the running time of an algorithm. So if somebody asks you what is big O notation, it is nothing but it represents the upper bound. That's it. Nothing to answer. It represents the upper bound. Then what it represents? The upper bound represents the worst case complexity. So you might have observed that anywhere when we want to express the complexity of an algorithm, you always try to express it in terms of big O only. So that is the importance of the worst case analysis we have. So big O always represents worst case. So it is upper bound. So big O notation is very much important, where we will be denoting the complexity or the performance of the algorithms using big O notations only, mostly, right? And coming to the omega notation, so this represents the lower bound of the running time of an algorithm, and since it is representing the lower bound, it is called as the best case complexity. Lower bound in the sense it cannot go beyond this value, so that is the lower bound it is specifying. So this is our graph f of n, and this is some best case complexity, some big O of g of n, that we will see it in the graphs also. So this function cannot go beyond this value. So this represents the lower value, and this is nothing but the best case complexity, right? And what about this big O notation? It represents the upper bound. So this function cannot go beyond this upper bound. So this represents the worst case, right? It is the maximum value it can reach. The f of n can reach this maximum value, and this represents the minimum value. So f of n, it can reach up to this minimum value, it cannot go beyond this minimum value. So this is called the lower bound, and this is called the upper bound. So the upper bound represents the worst case complexity, and the lower bound represents the best case complexity. So other than these two, we have the theta notation, big theta notation. Theta notation encloses the function from above and below, right? So it is used for analyzing the average case complexity of an algorithm. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes sir.
Right. So coming to the big O notation, the definition of big O notation is big O of g of n is equal to f of n. Here this is the function which we are going to concentrate. So our function is f of n. So we define big O of g of n is equal to f of n. There exists a positive constant c and n naught such that 0 less than or equal to f of n less than or equal to c into g of n for all n greater than equal to n naught. So this is the formula that is given. This is the mathematical formula that is defined for this big O notation. So f of n, where it is lying? So the f of n lies between the 0 and c into g of n. This is called the upper bound. So by this formula you can see that this f of n cannot go beyond this c into g of n. So that is the reason why we are calling it as the upper bound. Is it clear?
Yes sir.
So this is what I have described till now, right? For any value of n, you take any value of n, the running time of an algorithm does not cross the time provided by big O of g of n. So it never goes beyond g of n. Any value of n you take, but it never goes beyond this g of n. That is the upper bound. It is specifying the upper bound, right? So since this big O notation gives the worst case running time of an algorithm, it is widely used to analyze an algorithm, as we are always interested in the worst case scenario only. This is what we have discussed. So always try to express the efficiency of the algorithm or measure the performance of the algorithm in terms of worst case only. So big O notation is the most widely used notation since it represents the worst case scenario. Right. So this is the graph we have told, right? So this is the function of our interest, and this C into G of n represents the upper bound, and he is saying that it cannot, f of n cannot go beyond, it cannot go beyond this value for any value of n. You can see here, this is n naught, here it starts, and for any value of n you take, it never crosses this C into G of n. So this is the big O notation. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So the other one is the counterpart, which is the omega notation, big omega notation. So big omega of G of n is equal to f of n if there exists a positive constant C and n naught, such that you can observe the difference between the formula of big O notation and big omega notation. There I have written it as 0 less than or equal to f of n less than or equal to C into G of n. Right. So C into G of f of n cannot go beyond this C into G of n. But here I have written the formula as 0 less than or equal to C into G of n less than or equal to f of n. So f of n does not go below this value. So this C into G of n represents the lower bound. This represents lower bound. Right. So for any value of n, the minimum time required by the algorithm is given by omega of G of n. So it represents the minimum time, and therefore this omega notation is considered to be the best case. Right. So this is the graphical notation. As I said that f of n is our graph of interest, and C into G of n is representing the lower bound here, and for any value of n you take, you can observe here that f of n is not even touching this C into G of n. Right. Sometimes at one point of time it may touch this C into G of n, but it never goes below this C into G of n. So this represents the lower bound, and hence this omega notation is representing the best case. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. Next, the third notation is the theta notation. We call it as the big theta notation. Here we are denoting this big theta of G of n is equal to f of n, such that there exist positive integers. Remember, here we are taking two positive integers, C1 and C2 and n naught, such that 0 is less than or equal to C1 into G of n less than or equal to f of n less than or equal to C2 into G of n for all values of n greater than or equal to n naught. That means the f of n is bounded in between this C1 into G of n and C2 into G of n. Right. See here, if a function f of n lies anywhere between C1 into G of n and C2 into G of n, then f of n is said to be asymptotically tight bound. Therefore, our f of n, you can observe the graph here, our f of n is lying in between this C2 into G of n and C1 into G of n. So f of n is going to represent the average case analysis. It is not going to specify this C1 into G of n is not the lower bound, this C2 into G of n is not the upper bound. Those are some constants, and we define this function C1, C2 and into G of n, and these represents some the boundaries of this f of n, where we can calculate the average case complexity of an algorithm. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Right. And last and few important points you should consider is the properties of the asymptotic notation. Very simple properties. Right. So the general property, if f of n is big O of G of n, then constant a is nothing but a constant. A into f of n is also big O of G of n, where a is a constant. We will see it with an example. So let us take f of n is equal to 2n square plus 5. So what could be the asymptotic notation here? Do we need to consider the constants here?
No, sir.
No, sir.
No, so it becomes big O of 2n square, and as I told that there is no need to consider the coefficients also, therefore it ultimately leads to big O of n square. Am I right or not?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Now if I multiply this f of n with a constant, look at here, 7 into f of n. So what happens to 7 into f of n? It is 7 into 2n square plus 5. It is equal to 14n square plus 35. So what happens to this particular complexity? Asymptotic notation, what happens to it? So 35 is a constant, ignore it. 14 is a coefficient of the biggest term, ignore it. Therefore it becomes big O of n square. So f of n is having a complexity of big O of n square only, and a into f of n, where a is a constant, is also having a complexity of big O of n square, right? So this is one general property you should remember. Is it clear? And this applies to both big O of theta and omega also. So this is not the case only with the worst case, it also applies to the average case and best case also. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Right. Similarly, there exists a transitive property. So if f of n is big O of g of n and g of n is big O of h of n, then f of n is equal to big O of h of n. Very simple. Transitive means if a is having a relationship with b and b is having a relationship with c, then obviously we have a that is related to c. Right. This is the transitive property. Let us look it with an example. If f of n is equal to n, g of n is equal to n square and h of n is equal to n cube, that is n is having big O of n square and n square is having big O of n cube, then n is equal to big O of n cube. So this is the property which is called as transitive property, and this property is also applicable to both big O of theta and big theta and big omega also. Right? Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Right. So don't worry about these symmetric properties and transpose symmetric properties. We are not going to use it. But these properties, the last properties are very important. Very, very important. Please concentrate. This is our last slide. So if the first property we are going to tell is if f of n is equal to big O of g of n and f of n is equal to omega of g of n, then f of n is equal to theta of g of n. Right. For the same function f of n, we are expressing the best case complexity and we are expressing the, what is omega? Is it the best case or worst case?
Best case, sir.
Best case, right? Then f of n we can express it in the average case also. This is one important property. And these two properties, the second and third properties, are very important. Right. So what this property is saying is if f of n is equal to big O of g of n and d of n, this is another function, and d of n is equal to big O of e of n, then f of n plus d of n is equal to big O of max of g of n comma e of n. So whatever complexities we have here, g of n and e of n, we have to take the maximum value of g of n and e of n when we combine these functions f of n and d of n. Let us solve it with a simple example. Let us take f of n is equal to n. That means we are representing this f of n with big O of n. Am I right or not?
Yes, sir.
This is our first function, and we are taking another function d of n is equal to n square. That means I am expressing this d of n in big O of n square, right? So what is this big O of n square? N square is nothing but e of n. Am I right or not? Am I right or not?
Yes, sir.
And what about this n? It is nothing but g of n. So if I combine these two functions f of n and d of n, what is f of n? Which is n. What is d of n? N square. So this becomes n plus n square. What is the total, what is the ultimate time complexity of this n into n plus n square?
Big O of n square, sir.
It is big O of n square. So can we take this as the maximum of n square and n? So f of n plus d of
Yes,
n
sir.
is equal to big O of max of, what is g of n here? It is n. What is e of n here? N square. What is max of n and n square? What is the maximum value
N
of n?
square,
and n?
sir.
It is n square. Right. So is it clear up to this point? This particular property we are going to use more frequently. That is the reason why I am stressing on this. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And the last property also we will make use of it very frequently. If f of n is equal to big O of g of n and d of n is equal to big O of e of n, if you multiply those functions f of n into d of n, then we have to multiply the time complexities also, right? G of n into e of n, that is big O of n, right? So let us take an example, the same example. F of n is equal to n, that is the complexity is represented as big O of n, and d of n is equal to n square, that is the complexity is represented as big O of n square. Now I take the product of this f of n and d of n. So that is equal to n into n square. What is n into n square?
N cube, sir.
N cube, sir.
So the complexity can be represented as n cube. Is it not the product of the big O of n into n square or not? Big O of n cube is equal to big O of n into n square. That is nothing but big O of n is nothing but this g of n, and e of n is nothing but n square. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
So
sir.
when we add two functions, when we add the complexity of two functions, you should take the maximum complexity of either of the functions. Which one is having the maximum? The sum of those functions will be having the same value, right? But when you take the product of these two functions, so you should multiply the complexities and you should take the result. These 2 points you should remember. Other than this, nothing more than. Is it clear up to this point?
Yes, sir.
Right. So this is end of today's session. In today's session we have discussed the algorithm, the characteristics of algorithm, the metrics that are used to measure the performance of the algorithm, and then we have moved to the asymptotic notation. What actually these asymptotic notations are, why we have taken the asymptotic behavior, which is a mathematical tool, into our measuring the complexities of the algorithms. The only reason, if somebody asks you why there is a asymptotic why you have taken the asymptotic notation into our algorithms, means in order to express the complexities in a single term. In order to express the complexities in a single term, we have taken the concept of asymptotic from mathematics to the computer science. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And then we have discussed the three asymptotic notation, that is big O notation, which represents the upper bound and it represents the worst case analysis, and the second one is big omega notation, which represents the lower bound, which represents the best case analysis, and the third one is big theta notation, which represents the average case analysis. And we have seen some properties of the asymptotic notations, which we will make use of them very frequently in our programming part. So these properties are very important. So this is all about today's session. We have discussed everything in detail, right? So this is the end of today's session. Thank you one and all for your patience up to 1:30. I'm sorry for that one. So you can leave and join, take your lunch, and you can join the other